Dad left everything to me, not you. Melissa Griffin screamed, her voice echoing through the Colonial in Westchester I had called home for 15 years. I stood there, clutching Frank Phillips' memorial service program, still wearing my black dress from the service just 3 days earlier. My heart felt like it had been torn in half all over again. My name is Janet Phillips, and I am 59 years old. Until this moment, I thought I knew my place in this family. Frank Phillips and I had been married for 15 years, and I had raised Melissa Griffin since she was 13 after her mother passed away. Now, at 28, she was acting like a stranger who despised everything about me. Frank Phillips left specific instructions about how things should be handled, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe we should sit down and discuss this calmly. Melissa Griffin's face twisted with fury. There's nothing to discuss. The estate attorney already explained everything to me. The Colonial in Westchester, the money, the investments, it's all mine now. $7 million and you get nothing. The cruelty in her voice shocked me. This was the same girl I had helped with homework, driven to school events, and comforted through teenage heartbreaks. Where was the gratitude for the woman who had stepped in to mother her when she needed it most? Melissa Griffin, I'm not trying to take anything from you, I said, reaching toward her. I just thought we could work together to handle Frank Phillips' affairs properly. She jerked away from my touch. Work together? You were just his second wife. I'm his blood, his real family. You were convenient when he needed someone to cook and clean, but now that he's gone, you're not needed anymore. Her words hit me like physical blows. I had loved Frank Phillips deeply, and I thought he had loved me too. We had built a life together, sharing dreams and making plans for the future. I had never thought of myself as just convenient. Your father and I had many conversations about the future, I began, but Melissa Griffin cut me off. Stop calling him my father like you have some claim to him. Janet Phillips stared at Frank's reading glasses, still resting where he left them on the nightstand. Her fingers gripped the edge, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the Colonial in Westchester. A faint scent of rain drifted in through the open window, carrying the rustle of drying leaves, whispers of the home they had shared. Behind the closed door, Melissa Griffin's angry voice replayed in her mind. You don't belong here, Melissa had spat, her bitterness sharp as broken glass. Dad left everything to me. But beneath the estate attorney's official words and Melissa's fury, something felt off. The will was clear. Or was it? Frank had always been careful, meticulous. Had he left more than just money? A secret? A warning? Janet's heart pounded. Was Melissa telling the truth? Or was there one last safeguard Frank had hidden? The silence of the room pressed down, full of memories and unanswered questions. Janet's chest tightened. 3 days ago, they had planned a trip to Europe for their anniversary. Now she was being pushed out, unseen, unwanted. Melissa's words pierced deeper than grief. You're just a second wife, she said. I'm his blood. You were convenient. Could a family torn apart ever find its way back? Or was this the final fracture? Inside that quiet room, Janet's mind raced. She walked to Frank's desk, running her fingers over papers, documents he always kept close. Maybe, just maybe. There was more to the story, more than Melissa's anger and bitterness. Would the truth change everything, or would it only deepen the divide? The answer lay hidden, waiting to be uncovered in the shadows of Frank's legacy. Janet Phillips had always admired Frank's careful nature, how he pored over every contract, every statement, wanting to protect both her and Melissa. You have to understand, he said just 6 months before he passed. Melissa is young, impulsive. I want to be sure she's ready for this, for everything. Back then, I thought he was just being cautious. Melissa was a marketing coordinator at a small design firm, focused on her career, social life, never really settling down. But now, in this quiet, empty Colonial in Westchester, I see what Frank might have seen, what I missed. Melissa's complaining about hospital visits, her eyes always drifting to the estate, not Frank's. What's this worth? This room? That patch of land? I hear her voice like a cold wind. And then that knock. Sharp, impatient. Janet, start packing. Contractors are coming tomorrow to start renovations. The nerve of her. Frank's body barely rested and she was already erasing the life we made. I opened the door. Melissa stood there, phone in one hand, notebook in the other. I'm thinking of expanding the master suite, walk-in closet. You know, little upgrades, she said, like she was naming paint colors, not dismantling memories. The next morning, noise filled the Colonial in Westchester. Voices, footsteps, contractors measuring, planning. The sounds punched through the stillness, turning the home I shared with Frank into a stranger's property. Was this just about the Colonial in Westchester, or something deeper? Could this family survive the fractures, or was the foundation already crumbling beneath us? The air felt heavy. Janet folded away Frank's documents. The scent of rain slipped through the cracked window. Melissa's voice bounced off the hallway walls, sharp, impatient, circling the Colonial in Westchester like vultures. My fingers paused on a faded photo, heart pounding with a sharp ache. Had I overlooked something all along? Melissa's shadow flickered at the doorway. Would I confront her now, before the past disappears for good? Or is it too late? The answer hung, fragile, waiting in the silence. I found Melissa in the kitchen, surrounded by fabric swatches and paint chips, her phone pressed against her ear as she spoke with sharp urgency. Yes, I want the entire first floor opened up. No limits on the budget. She poked at a glossy sample, her eyes gleaming with plans. The Colonial hadn't seen an update since the 90s, and she was determined to remake it into something sleek, modern, her vision, not Dad's. When she spotted me, she cut the call short. Finally, she said, voice clipped. I need you to clear out Dad's office today. The architect wants to turn it into a wine cellar and tasting room. A wine cellar? Dad barely touched a drink. Melissa's idea of wine tasting was whatever overpriced label caught her eye at the grocery store. I hesitated. Don't you think it's too soon? Dad just passed 3 days ago. Maybe we should grieve first, before tearing everything apart. Her face hardened like a shutter slamming down. I don't need your pity, she snapped. I've already mourned him. It's time to move forward, and that means making this Colonial in Westchester mine. She swept toward a contractor inspecting the living room walls. Can we take down this wall? I want an entertainment space, big screen, bar, everything. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Those walls held Dad's family photos, his built-in bookshelves filled with decades of journals and memories. To me, they were sacred. To her, nothing more than obstacles. When the contractor stepped outside, she announced, I'm going to the bank this afternoon. I want all of Dad's accounts transferred to me immediately. Confused, I asked, The accounts? Dad always handled our finances together. Are you sure there won't be complications? She smiled, a frosty, condescending curl that made my chest tighten. Janet, you clearly don't understand inheritance law. When someone dies, their assets go to their children, not the spouse from a second marriage. Dad's estate attorney explained it all yesterday. I stood frozen, the scent of rain pressing through the window and the weight of decades of silence settling like dust around us. Was this just a fight over property? Or was something deeper, older, finally unraveling between us? What had I missed all these years? And was respect, dignity, and closure still within reach? Or had it slipped away forever? Dust motes floated in the afternoon sunlight as Melissa strode through the Colonial in Westchester, her voice trailing off when the contractor carefully unrolled a blueprint on the kitchen table. Janet's eyes flicked to the edge of the counter and froze. There, tucked beneath a loose tile, was a hidden stack of papers she hadn't seen before. trust documents, codicils, with her name faintly inked on the top sheet. A chill whispered through the room, thick as the scent of rain pressing against the windows. Melissa had made it all sound so simple. $7 million, everything hers. But here, in this forgotten pile, lay the reality. Frank's intentions weren't as clear-cut as Melissa claimed. His legal web was tangled, and someone else's signature could change everything. Janet's hand trembled as anger drained from her. What had she missed? Was this fight just about money? Or something deeper? Something kept quiet for years? Melissa was already back, directing the contractors with sharp, possessive energy. Marble countertops, a steam shower, dreams she claimed were long overdue. Janet swallowed hard, her voice a whisper against the clatter of hammers. "Melissa, can we just talk? Maybe we're rushing this. Maybe we're missing what Dad wanted." But Melissa's laugh cut cold. "This isn't about you anymore. It's my colonial in Westchester now." Her words hung heavy, as if the years Janet had lived here meant nothing. Janet took a slow breath. Beneath the surface of grief and bitterness lay a stubborn hope. Could respect still be earned? Could dignity survive this storm? Or was her family's future already slipping through her fingers, like dust in the sunlight? Janet Phillips' hands trembled as a memory flooded back, a scent of roast chicken drifting from the kitchen, Frank's deep laughter bouncing off the colonial's walls. A rare, quiet moment before Melissa slammed the door, eyes ablaze with fury and resentment. Candlelight softened the corners of old hurts just that one night. The soft tick of Frank's watch, his steady hand resting gently on Janet's shoulder. A brief sense of belonging, fragile and fleeting, but that warmth, once comforting, twisted sharp with the cold sting of rejection now. Could any peace survive this storm? "Your father loved me," Janet said quietly, trying to anchor herself. "And I thought you cared about me, too." Melissa's voice cracked and rose with bitter mockery. "Love? You were a convenience. Someone to cook and clean while Dad focused on building his real legacy." Her eyes flicked toward the contractors as if daring them to witness her claim. "I played colonial in Westchester for 15 years, but the game is over. This place is mine now." Janet's breath caught. "Your cozy little nest?" Melissa sneered. "I'm turning this colonial in Westchester into something worthy of someone young, not some middle-aged widow." The words landed hard, but Janet found her voice. "What about Frank's wishes? Don't you think we should honor his memory?" Melissa laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "Honor his memory? The best honor is enjoying the wealth he built. $7 million isn't for sitting pretty in boring investments." She flipped open her phone. "Look, I'm already shopping. New car, handbags, jewelry, things I deserve." Janet stared at the screen showing prices that many wouldn't see in a lifetime. "This kind of reckless spending, it won't last, even with that kind of money." Melissa scoffed. "Frank Phillips always said," she mimicked mockingly. "Frank Phillips always said." Her voice dropped. "He's gone now. I'm 28. I want to live while I still can." She added more items to her digital cart, her fingers flying, reckless and sure. $7 million is more than anyone could spend, even lavishly. I'll renovate the colonial in Westchester, buy what I want, and still have millions left. Janet glanced away, the cold rain tapping softly against the colonial's windows like a hollow echo of lost family ties. How do you hold on to respect when love feels like a transaction? How do you find closure in a colonial in Westchester filled with bitterness? Yet, beneath the cracks, Janet held on to a stubborn hope. Maybe dignity could survive the fight. Maybe, despite everything, there was still a way to honor Frank's true legacy, beyond dollars and disputes. Was it too late to mend what was broken? Or was this the final fracture in a family unraveling too fast to be sewn back together? The old desk lamp cast a warm, amber glow over the cluttered piles of legal pads and receipts, each page stained with Frank's neat block letters. The faint scent of his cologne still hung in the air, mingling with the quiet dust that had settled over this room. His sanctuary. Outside the door, laughter echoed down the hallway. Melissa's voice floated through, full of triumph as she celebrated with her friends. But here, in this dim office, I touched a thick, sealed manila envelope hidden beneath a ledger, its weight promising secrets yet unopened. My heart pounded. What had Frank left behind? Something beyond money. A message, a condition. I hesitated, then slowly peeled back the flap. I watched Melissa's face as she bragged about spending every penny, reckless and proud. She wasn't just eager to spend the inheritance, she was ready to burn it all. But what if Frank planned for this? What if he set rules, carefully crafted to keep his legacy intact? I asked cautiously, "Did he leave any conditions?" Her eyes instantly hardened. What kind of conditions? I swallowed. I don't know. But Frank was always so meticulous. It would be strange if he handed over millions without strings attached. Melissa sneered. You're just trying to scare me. Jealous, maybe. But behind the mask of anger, I caught a flicker of doubt. That night, her plans grew wilder. She filled the Colonial in Westchester with friends, throwing a party as if the estate was already hers. Yet here I was, alone in Frank's office, tracing the very steps he took, hoping to find a thread of truth. Frank had been precise about everything. From his morning coffee to investments, nothing was left to chance. The idea that he'd give away $7 million without a plan felt impossible. I dug through the drawers, each creak of wood echoing in the stillness. Then, in the bottom drawer, a confidential file labeled Estate Planning. Inside, letters, documents, legal jargon, but one letter stood apart. Dated just 2 months before Frank passed. Dear Mr. Phillips, it began. Per your request, we have established the Melissa Griffin Trust Fund with the conditions and restrictions we discussed. The trust will ensure your daughter learns financial responsibility while protecting both her and your spouse's long-term interests. My hands trembled, the weight of those words sinking in. What had Frank truly planned? Was Melissa right about enjoying the wealth now? Or had he set a course to challenge her, and perhaps to protect something more than money? I closed the envelope slowly. The rain outside whispered against the Colonial's windows, leaves rustling in the darkened yard. How does a family find peace when love is tangled with money? When legacies are weaponized? When the past won't let go? And, most importantly, what lay waiting inside that trust could change everything. The letter detailed a complex trust structure with very specific conditions. Melissa Griffin would not receive direct access to the inheritance until she turned 35. Until then, all funds would be managed by a trustee. And according to the document, Frank Phillips had named me as the primary trustee. I could hear Melissa Griffin and her friends laughing loudly in the living room, their voices carrying through the Colonial in Westchester as they celebrated what they thought was her windfall. I'm thinking of taking a year off work to travel, I heard Melissa Griffin saying. Why should I work some boring job when I'm independently wealthy now? Another voice asked, Are you sure you want to quit so quickly? What if there are complications with the inheritance? Complications? Melissa Griffin's laugh was dismissive. What kind of complications? Dead dad, living daughter, $7 million. It's pretty straightforward. I continued reading the trust documents, discovering layer after layer of conditions Frank Phillips had put in place. Melissa Griffin would need trustee approval for any expenditure over $500. She would be required to maintain steady employment or pursue education. Most significantly, the trust included specific language about demonstrating respect for family members and honoring the deceased values. A separate document outlined Frank Phillips' reasoning for these restrictions. He had observed Melissa Griffin's impulsive spending habits and her sometimes selfish behavior. He worried that sudden wealth would destroy her character rather than enhance her life. The trust was designed to help her mature into someone worthy of the inheritance. But there was more. Frank Phillips had also included provisions for my own financial security. The trust would provide for my housing, health care, and living expenses for the rest of my life. He had protected both of us, ensuring Melissa Griffin couldn't abandon her responsibilities to the family while also ensuring I wouldn't be left vulnerable. Coffee sat cold in Janet Phillips' trembling hand. The smell of fresh rain clung faintly to the cracked kitchen window, mixing with the distant hum of contractors' tools slicing through the quiet Colonial in Westchester. Outside, leaves rustled in the wind, but inside, time seemed frozen. Across the room, Melissa Griffin's voice, once brimming with triumph, faltered, then faded entirely. Her knuckles clenched white around her phone as her confident smile drained, replaced by bare confusion. What words, what truth had silenced her so utterly? What secret did this frozen moment hide? The tension in the air thickened, pressing down until even the warm afternoon light seemed trapped behind glass. Janet held her breath. Could this phone call unravel everything? Her hopes, her grief, her fight for dignity? Just days before, Melissa celebrated loudly, certain she'd won. Why work a boring job when you're rich now? Her laughter echoed through the Colonial's walls. But now, a trust, hidden deep in the family's maze of wills, stood like a locked gate between her and the inheritance. A gate Janet was named to guard. She'd discovered her late husband Frank's intentions weren't as simple as they'd seemed. Melissa would not claim the $7 million outright. No, she faced conditions: steady employment, respect for family values, trustee approval for any big spending. Most striking was the reason Frank left these terms: to protect his daughter from herself. He'd feared sudden wealth might shatter more than just bank accounts. And Janet, she wasn't just a grieving widow. She was chosen protector, granted financial security, yes, but also a burden, to hold Melissa accountable, even if it meant rejection and resentment. Now, standing in the quiet kitchen, Janet met Melissa's wild-eyed stare. "You knew about the trust, didn't you?" Melissa whispered. Janet's heart tightened. Could she be the family's savior, or its final fracture? And would Melissa ever see her as anything but the enemy? The Colonial in Westchester held its breath, waiting for the answer neither was ready to give. "That's why you kept asking about conditions and complications." I sat down my coffee cup carefully. I knew your father was thorough about financial planning. "Where are the trust documents?" Melissa Griffin demanded. "I need to see exactly what this means." "I believe they're with Frank Phillips' attorney," I replied calmly. Melissa Griffin was already dialing her phone. "Mr. Morrison, this is Melissa Griffin. I need to see you immediately about my father's trust." "What do you mean I should bring Janet Phillips?" She ended the call and stared at me with growing horror. "He says you're the trustee. He says I need your permission to access any significant funds." The contractors chose that moment to return from their lunch break, ready to begin the demolition Melissa Griffin had authorized just hours earlier. "Miss Melissa Griffin," one of them called out. "Should we start taking down that wall in the living room?" Melissa Griffin looked at the contractors, then at me, then back at the contractors. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. "How much is this renovation going to cost?" I asked quietly. "About $50,000, she whispered. "And how much money do you have in your personal accounts?" "About $3,000. The lead contractor approached us. "We'll need the first payment before we start any work. That'll be $15,000. Melissa Griffin's face crumbled as the full weight of her situation became clear. She had quit her job that morning, spent her personal savings on a shopping spree, and committed to expensive renovations she couldn't afford. All based on access to money that was now locked away from her. "I need to call them back," she said desperately. "There has to be a way to fix this." But I could see in her eyes that she was beginning to understand. The power dynamic she thought she controlled had just reversed completely. She wasn't the wealthy heiress making demands. She was a 28-year-old woman who had just discovered she was entirely dependent on the stepmother she had tried to throw out of the Colonial in Westchester. The contractors were waiting for an answer. Rain drummed steadily against the windows of the Colonial in Westchester, cold and unyielding. Janet Phillips sat quietly across from Melissa Griffin, watching the color drain from Melissa's face. The leather chair creaked as Melissa's trembling hand hovered uncertainly over the trust document. Then, without meeting Janet's eyes, she pushed it slowly across the coffee table. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Then Melissa's voice broke the quiet. "There's a second will," she whispered, eyes still locked on the table. "I found it last night. Dad, he changed everything, weeks before he died." A sharp scent of aged leather mixed with the stale fear hanging between them. Janet's heart tightened. The war over inheritance wasn't over. The rules had just been rewritten, and everything they thought they knew was suddenly up in the air. The contractors outside were waiting, ready to tear down walls Melissa had already committed thousands to renovate. But now, facing the truth, even she didn't know what to do. Janet cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "Gentlemen, we're going to have to pause the renovation. We need to sort out the financing first." The lead contractor blinked, confused. Melissa's pale hands clenched the arms of her chair. Just yesterday, she'd been so sure, so victorious. "I don't control the estate," Janet said gently. "Not yet. Your father set things up this way for a reason." Melissa's voice cracked. 7 years? 7 more years before I can access anything?" Janet nodded. "You'll have $500 a month for expenses, and I oversee everything else. It was meant to teach responsibility." Melissa's eyes welled. "But I quit my job. I told my boss I was independently wealthy. I can't live on that." Janet's heart ached. Melissa's desperation was real, even if it had been fueled by entitlement. The trust covered housing, health care, education, but it wouldn't cover instant freedom. Not yet. The air shifted, once so thick with resentment, now tinged with reluctant understanding. The fight for the family legacy was far from over, and as leaves rustled outside in the autumn wind, both women braced for the battles still to come. A summer morning flashes behind Janet's eyes. Years ago, the screen door slamming with a familiar bang. Frank's laugh fills the warm air, while Melissa, wild-haired and barefoot, races past flower beds bursting with lavender and daisies. The scent of fresh-cut grass mingles with the buttery smell of pancakes sizzling in the kitchen. Melissa's face, open, trusting, full of light, shines in Janet's memory. It's a scene so distant now, faded beneath the weight of years. But the sadness in Melissa's voice today stirs that memory again. How did they go from laughter and sunshine to this silence? This battle over what should have bound them? Melissa's voice breaks the heavy quiet. "What do I have to do?" she asks, eyes glistening with tears, the first real emotion Janet has seen since Frank's passing. The woman across the Colonial's coffee table, the daughter she once knew, is still there, buried beneath layers of anger and hurt. "You have to show responsibility. Keep a steady job or pursue your education, and respect the family," Janet says carefully. "Your father insisted on that." Melissa flinches, a flash of remorse crossing her face. And he wanted the Colonial in Westchester kept as it was. No gut renovations. He loved this place. Melissa's bitterness sharpens. "So you get to decide if I deserve my own inheritance." Janet meets her gaze, calm but resolute. "Your father's inheritance. He trusted me to protect it for your future." Melissa falls silent, wrestling with the truth. Then, quietly, "What if I don't meet the terms?" Janet refers to the trust documents. "If you don't follow the rules, the money goes to charities promoting financial literacy. You get nothing." The color drains from Melissa's face. "He'd really do that?" Cut me off? Janet nods. Frank believed wealth without character meant nothing. She watches Melissa walk to the window, eyes fixed on the garden Frank tended with care. For the first time, it seems she's seeing him, not just the money. I've been horrible to you, Melissa admits, voice trembling. Yes, you have, Janet agrees softly. The air is thick with unspoken regrets. Outside, the wind rustles leaves, the soft sound a reminder that love and loss often grow tangled, but there might still be a chance to heal. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Can you ever forgive me? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Melissa had spent 7 long years tangled in a struggle she never expected. Financially dependent, yet fiercely proud, she lived under the roof of the Colonial in Westchester, the very home she once wanted to claim without compromise. Frank Phillips' trust had clear rules. She had to prove respect, responsibility, and care for the family before touching a single dime. But life wasn't kind. Melissa's frantic attempts to find steady work were blocked by her impulsive decisions and lack of solid references. Entry-level jobs barely covered rent and bills. That shiny car she'd ordered? Repossessed when payments stopped coming. Friends she thought she had faded away, distancing themselves once they saw her. Wealthy status was just a dream fading fast. Bills piled up. Credit scores sank. Pride took a hit worse than any words could, having to move back into the childhood bedroom she had once abandoned, living by the very rules she had scorned. It was humiliating. Explaining to contractors, friends, even strangers, I was wrong about my inheritance. The whispers followed her like shadows. Spoiled daughter who pushed away her grieving stepmother, only to realize she needed Janet's approval to breathe. Meanwhile, I signed the lease on my modest apartment, paid for by the trust's provisions to care for me. In that moment, Frank Phillips's wisdom struck me harder than ever. He hadn't just secured money or land. He had built something far more valuable, a chance for Melissa to grow, to learn, to earn what she truly deserved, to understand what it meant to be part of this family beyond the cents and dollars. Sometimes, the most powerful lesson is not punishment. It's awakening, teaching someone the priceless worth of what they nearly lost forever. Could Melissa find forgiveness in her heart? Could we both move beyond this pain? Only time would tell. But in that quiet moment, beneath the sighing leaves outside, there was a fragile hope taking root.